They called it a joke at first. The cranky old farmer who mixed things wrong because he was too proud to follow the seed salesman's pamphlet. In the damp, wind-sliced fields where he'd spent a lifetime reading Soil by Touch and Moon, the farmer had learned to listen to his land more than to manuals. When a series of poor harvests and rising prices drove him to experiment, nobody expected that the clumsy hey-wait-what of his backyard tinkering would ripple into the heart of a global conflict. The farmer's experiment was born from necessity. Plagued by soil that seemed to drink every planted seed and return bitterness, he tried a different blend of commercial fertilizers and farm waste compost, the kind of makeshift alchemy that farmers have practiced for centuries. His neighbors mocked the mixture as stupid and ugly, earth-brown sludge that smelled of rot and rain and stubbornness. Yet to the farmer's bewilderment, the fields responded. The next season's crops were healthier, taller, and more resilient. Word spread the way it always does in small towns, slowly, over fences and in the queues at the co-op. That word reached ears that did not belong to other farmers. Industrial suppliers, chemical companies, and, eventually, military procurement agents were all watching the agricultural sector closely. In times of upheaval, industries looked to unconventional sources for advantage. What had been a local curiosity became a subject of interest because, at an abstract chemical level, many fertilizers and industrial agents share building blocks with other materials. Without ever intending to, the farmer's stupid mix highlighted an overlooked pathway between civilian chemistry and military demand. History is full of such coincidences. Innovations that begin as humble fixes, a new alloy, a different fermentation, an unorthodox mixture, can be repurposed when political storms gather. The critical point isn't the innovation itself, but how knowledge travels and how it is applied. Information that is benign in one context can become dangerous in another when actors with different intentions and resources repurpose it. In this case, the farmer's blend was stripped of its local story and reframed as a scalable, industrially attractive shortcut. Technical experts down the line did not need the farmer's wisdom about soil. They needed the conceptual insight that certain raw materials could be sourced or substituted in ways previously overlooked. It is important to underscore what this narrative does not include: recipes, measurements, or step-by-step processes. The frightening potency of the story lies not in chemical specifics but in the socio-political and ethical pathways that convert civilian innovation into instruments of war. From the co-op to the factory, decisions were driven by urgency, by supply shortages, and by the institutional pressure to meet quotas. When official supply chains frayed, creative problem-solving filled the gaps. Private industry and governments, keen to preserve momentum and avoid visible scarcity, sometimes embraced shortcuts before fully understanding downstream risks. The farmer himself remained a curious, tragic figure in this unfolding drama. He had never sought fame or influence. He wanted only to coax better life from the soil and protect his family from hunger. When his method was abstracted and scaled, he watched with a mix of pride and alarm as his stupid blend was purified into a jargon-filled dossier and debated in boardrooms. He had no power to shape the consequences. In the end, he became a footnote in memos, a human source converted into data. That fate is not uncommon. The originator of an idea seldom controls how others will wield it. There are moral lessons here that matter for ordinary citizens and for policymakers. First, knowledge leaks easily, and once it has, its applications multiply in ways that are impossible to predict. The open exchange of ideas, the lifeblood of scientific and agricultural progress, therefore comes with a responsibility to think about misuse. Second, systems that produce essential goods must be resilient. Brittle supply chains and opaque procurement incentives make dangerous repurposing more likely. Finally, people who work with materials that have dual uses deserve recognition in policy debates, not only as technicians but as stakeholders whose livelihoods and moral consciences are implicated. Societies have tried to grapple with this tension in different ways. Some approaches focus on regulation, tighter controls on the sale and distribution of sensitive materials, better routing of industrial byproducts, and mandatory reporting when novel uses are detected. Others emphasize education and community engagement, empowering farmers and local producers to recognize signs of misuse and to demand that their innovations be employed only for peaceful purposes. Still others focus on transparency in procurement and accountability in defense contracting. No single policy is a silver bullet, the challenge is to weave prevention into the everyday fabric of commerce and agriculture without choking off innovation. The story also exposes the human cost of technological drift. For every statistical account of millions of devices, or tons produced, there are families, fields, and reputations eroded by the downstream consequences. The farmer's neighbors remembered him differently after the world learned what his idea had helped enable, some with bitterness, others with sympathy. He continued to tend his plots, wrestling with a kind of survivor's guilt. He had wanted to help his community feed itself, not to empower destruction in some faraway theater. That dissonance haunted him in the long evenings when the fields were quiet and the telephone did not ring. If there is a final, practical takeaway, it is the need for humility. Innovations should be celebrated, but not naively. Communities, industries, and governments must build channels for early warning and for ethical assessment, especially when civilian materials could be repurposed for harm. That requires investment in local education, in better mapping of supply chains, and in forums where farmers and factory workers can speak directly with regulators and researchers. It also requires cultural change, accepting that the same curiosity that yields better harvests must sometimes be tempered by restraint. The farmer's stupid mix was not evil, it was the product of grief and ingenuity, the kind of small-scale experimentation that has fed humanity for millennia. What made it dangerous was not the intention behind it but the system that turned a local fix into a global tool without adequate safeguards. Remembering the human origin of such stories is the first step toward designing smarter institutions, ones that allow creativity to flourish while reducing the chances that ingenuity will be twisted into instruments of harm.